All right, welcome to the Recovery Bros podcast. This is a weekly YouTube show where two guys in recovery, myself, Adam Sudd, and Doug Bopst, translate addiction and mental health science into simple systems that young men can actually live through honest conversations, practical frameworks, and real world reps. And sometimes we like to talk about what is actually going on in the world. In previous episodes, we discussed the situation involving Britney Spears and her decision to check back into treatment, which was phenomenal. And we were applauding her for that. And today we're also going to talk about some pop culture news. We're going to be discussing the apparent relapse of Brad Pitt. So Doug, what's up?
What's up, man? I'm glad we're covering this because this is like reality of what addiction is. Sometimes people, they go back to using the substance of their choice, and sometimes they stay sober in recovery forever. I think the reason it's important to talk about it is because for some reason, whenever a celebrity relapses or decides to make a choice, their mental health or addiction choice, it ends up becoming mainstream news, and then it grabs attention. So I'm glad that we're talking about it.
And they also tend to paint the person who's relapsing in a really unfavorable light, as if they've become some kind of degenerate, or that they're a horrible person, or look how far they've fallen, or which I think is sensationalism at its best and also at its worst. Which so the reality is, I don't think anybody really knows other than Brad and the people close to him, maybe what's going on. But the media is going to spin a story that's going to sell, likes and engagement and all that stuff. And it's unfortunate. And you hate to see it because it makes the reality of their recovery much more difficult, because now there's a story about them that they either have to defend or ignore, both of which are difficult.
Yeah, and I think there's two different headlines I want to point out here, right? So the two of the headlines that when I just Googled Brad Pitt, hit news, I'm assuming these are two of the more viral articles. The Hollywood Reporter, August 12th, so this is 2 days ago, the title of the article says, addiction experts on Brad Pitt, quote, alcoholics are a horrible source of information about themselves, unquote. And then another headline from the New York Times, it says, Brad Pitt's return to drinking is not unsafe, experts say, but it's not for everyone. So those are like two conflicting headlines, if you will. I think both are true, right? There's truth to both, which we can get into. But I think it's also important to understand what addiction is, what addiction isn't, and then also to understand that one path is not for everyone.
Yeah, there's a reality that there's a difference between sobriety and recovery, in my opinion. I think that sobriety is an aspect of recovery, and certainly a necessary part of early recovery, is that sobriety is important and necessary. I would argue that sobriety for at least 1 to 2 years is a very valuable, if not necessary, step in recovery. But recovery long term doesn't mean you have to be substance free. I think that the relationship that everyone has to the substance and to their definition of struggle, I don't know the degree to which he found himself wanting to be sober. I don't really know that much about his alcoholism story, and so I'm going to be very careful with how I talk about it. I don't know why he decided to get sober. Maybe he just was like, I don't really want this in my life anymore. Maybe it was a problem, not sure. But either of those scenarios don't require for everybody that long-term you stay completely sober from all substances. I don't believe that to be true in recovery. Now, like what you said, the first quote, alcoholics are, I can't remember the
horrible like source of information for themselves or something like that.
Right. I mean, that's true for any addict. Addicts are, the addict who is using is going to create a story to protect the use, because the use is the one thing that makes their day and their lives tolerable. And so, of course, the story that comes from that person is not going to match reality, because reality is the thing they're trying to avoid. So it's that both can be true.
Yeah, and I think I don't know the ins and outs of his sobriety journey either. I saw the headlines and I was like, man, we should probably talk about this. What I will say is that I think both of those headlines are true. I'll start with the first one, and in this kind of piggybacking off what you said, when you're right, when you're in the thick of addiction, when you are handcuffed to a substance and it has control over you, I mean, reality to you is very distorted. and you can quickly find yourself rationalizing and justifying certain unhealthy behaviors because that drug has a hold of has this chokehold on you and you don't know what's right from what's wrong. Now the other thing about going out, that it's not unsafe, that it's not, necessarily always bad, I think is true. I think that there's certain people that don't necessarily need to be substance free, again, as long as they're doing things legally and they're doing things that's, in accordance to with state laws, not harming themselves or other people. Take all that out of the way. There's plenty of people that, end up having a healthier relationship with alcohol down the road. And so I don't want to shame somebody like Brad Pitt for doing so. I've had I had a guy on my podcast, or I interviewed a guy for a book I wrote years ago who who had the same kind of path where he found he was a hardcore alcoholic and then found himself being able to have a more tolerable relationship with it down the road after doing some work on himself. I think the problem becomes it's the same thing with Demi Lovato in California Sober. It's the same issue that I have with headlines like that, meaning the the average person, they look for some reason, I don't know what this is, but they look at celebrities like role models and they want to be them. So they will take something like a Brad Pitt situation or Demi Lovato and say, they're doing it, so can I. And your life is completely different than theirs. There's so many things you don't know about their story, their situation. And then I think it's very important to understand you and your life and your walk on your recovery journey, and not using uh, something like this Brad Pitt headline or other celebrities that have this more loose form of sobriety to justify you not getting your life together.
Yeah. Yeah. You'd want to say, well, if I was to look down the road, especially if you're someone early in recovery, if I was to look down the road 1 year from today, does the path of using a little bit seem like the best course of action for me to get my life back together? No.
No.
I mean, it's just no. It's no for now. And like that for now could be a while. And you know what? That's good. There's a lot that you have to learn about yourself, that you have to build back to your life, that you have to create for the first time about who you are going to be in the world now as this version of yourself who no longer uses and wants to build a life that looks like your goals and your the life you would want to be living. And none of those goals require use. None of them. And so it shouldn't be there. And so, when we see these, you named Demi Lovato and the phrase California Sober, which is like the idea that certain substances can be used in a sober recovery lifestyle, is like, yeah, sure, maybe down the road, but I mean, there is no scenario where those things help you recover better.
No, and I think especially in the first few years of recovery, people are looking for a way out to justify trying to go back and use things moderately. And I think outside of death now, with that being a fear and a reason to not justify continuing to use a dangerous substance, because obviously with what's happened with fentanyl and stuff like that, I think financially too, like I just did a quick Google search on Brad Pitt's net worth. And again, let's just say this is remotely accurate. I mean, it says he's worth $400 million. So the financial cost of him making a decision like this, it's a lot less to the average person. Like this guy can afford to go to treatment again and spend $100,000 a month at will, hire the best therapist, psychiatrist, psychologist, have a team around him, where the average person can't do that. The average person, if they relapse and go back to treatment over and over again because they're rationalizing and justifying use, you go bankrupt very easily, and you won't have the means to be able to continue that.
It also isn't likely going to harm his career. He commands the biggest roles in his craft, and he's wildly talented, and he's remarkably he is the epitome of a movie star and a leading man. And he's one of the best out there. One of my favorite actors, and so is not going to harm his career either. And for the average person, that's not the case. That's not your life. He's once in a lifetime, and he's one. You're not him. It's like, I'm sorry, but don't use that as a model to give yourself the permission to do something that in your heart, is likely not, in no way is it going to benefit you if you're trying to continue to pursue recovery.
Yeah, and I don't know the ins and outs of Brad's story. I think like you, I like a lot of the stuff that he's been in. I'm rooting for his life in general to get better and to if he happens to live a better life with what he's doing now, great. If not, if he wants to go back and find recovery, that's also awesome too. I think that it's easy to throw stones, at people from a mile away when we have our own problems that we're not addressing. That's why I think it's important to continue to do the work on yourself. And what I think this does, it does raise awareness, which is kind of sad to me that, you know, a lot of times addiction, mental health, it's like this slow burn of problem in our country. But when something like this happens, it's like boom, all over the news. It's like top of mind for people, which makes sense because of the amount of influence that celebrities do have. I think that people need to just be more. We talk a lot about honesty on the show, and I think that people need to have honest conversations with themselves about whatever it is that they're doing, because otherwise you will just end up somehow convincing yourself that it's okay to do certain things because of some headline you read on the internet. I mean, you see this in the health and wellness space. I
Yeah.
mean, it's wild.
A great example, in my opinion, of a celebrity story of use gone well and gone right is Robert Downey Jr. You know,
Yeah.
that guy, he talk about the idea of potentially burning every bridge you could possibly burn as a result of his use, and then just fully committing to recovery and getting his life back together. And he's better off now than I think he's ever been in his recovery and certainly in his career. And so it's like the thing is, when you see the celebrity example of addiction, when you look at it through the lens of celebrity, there's two things that I find to be compelling and a few things I find to be harmful. One is that it creates a story that it's a behavior of entitlement, right? Because here this guy's got the idea this guy has everything. He's a superstar. He's worth $400 million, right? He can do anything he wants, and yet like how dare you become, how entitled must you be? How selfish must you be to struggle? Which also lends to the idea that this is, but I think what's important is that this thing, your fame, your celebrity, your wealth doesn't protect you from the struggles that every human being can struggle with. The other thing that it shows you is that no matter who you are and where your status is in society, the work necessary to get yourself from the lowest point of your addiction to the highest point of your recovery is the same everybody has to do. Right? You may have access to more support, but it's still the same work. And it's still the same like climb. And what it in my opinion, why I like looking at it through that lens and think there's a good thing is that it humanizes it. It's like you could look at this in every lens. You could take someone who's got nothing and their struggle will be addiction, and it will look just like addiction in the same way it did for people like Robert Downey when he was at his worst. It's like it's the same thing. It's a human struggle.
Yeah, and I think if anything, celebrities, what they have access to is their access and their financial means can accelerate and I guess emphasize the guardrails they can put in place to protect them
Yes.
from relapse. And I think that if you look at a guy like Anthony Hopkins, to me has been
Yes.
a perfect example of recovery. And this also, to your point, in the sense that we're all human, it's also a very big warning. And I'm not talking about Brad's story in general, but if you think of, you brought up the thing of like, the guy has everything. I mean, people frequently comment on the way the guy looks, his physical stature, his acting ability, his success, financial stuff. It's like, why would this guy do anything like wrong? Why would he mess that up? We're not only all human, but the pursuit of dopamine and the pursuit of more, I think in that world really creeps up, because it's like I think we talked about this with the Britney Spears episode. It's like, well, how do you top like an Academy Award? How do you top
Yeah.
being like one of the most recognizable A-list celebrities to ever walk on the earth,
Yeah.
right? How do you top that? It's like Buzz Aldrin. I remember, he's been sober, I believe, for a long time. The guy landed on the moon. It's like, how do you How do you top that? And
Yeah,
so I think
perfect
these guys just,
example.
yeah.
I was just go ahead.
That was just to finish my point. It's like, how do you top these incredible pursuits, these incredibly successful things these people do?
Well, it's I think probably no better personified than Elvis Presley. I mean, the guy at the time, there's never been a musical artist like him, and he came from nothing, and then all of a sudden he had everything, and then all of a sudden everything was never enough, and ended up wildly addicted to everything, addicted to the pursuit of pleasure and the relief of pressure to continue to be the best and to perform and to it also was like when you have everything, everything is no longer special. You know, it's like what do you what makes what I would say what gives the pursuit of life interest when you have access to everything in life? There's no pursuit anymore. That's got to be tough.
It's got to be tough because then what do you aim for?
Yeah,
Because as humans, I think we're all trying to get better, and I think the people like Brad Pitt, I mean Britney Spears, I mean I go on with these examples. These people didn't get there by luck. There had to have been some innate characteristic and skill to persevere and continue to want to push for more and chase that next thing. And so, what happens when that next thing is like the top? It's like, where do you go
yeah,
from there?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
like what do you do? It's like, you and I often we connect a lot over sports cards. It's like if you the holy grail of all sports cards is the Mickey Mantle rookie card. If you two were to just acquire that thing, you know, through hard work, through just connections or whatever, I would be interested to know would that change your love and pursuit of the hobby? I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I don't know if it won't, but that's an example of that's the top. It's hard. Then it becomes harder to be like, the feeling of euphoria and accomplishment will never match that because you've already
Never.
won the game.
Yeah, that's a great example because the whole thing about the pursuit in the hobby is to pursue the next greatest card you can obtain. Well, when you obtain the greatest card there is, you may obtain some better cards in different sports, but it's not going to be the same. It just never will be. It's a really good example. It's basically the pleasure trap. It's when 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 you've exposed yourself to this experience of hyper stimulus of hyper achievement to where there is nothing left to aim at. Well, then not only are you habituated the to the highest experience of pleasure, and now that being normal, aimlessness is what drives anxiety. And so what is the thing that typically quells that generalized anxiety? It's dopamine. Well, and you can't get it and you have no aim. I mean, my gosh, you're gonna find any substance you can to escape that trap.
100%. And so I think I'm glad we covered this thing with Brad Pitt because again, these things come up and everybody's got an opinion on it. I mean, like I said, I just went through the top two headlines from two, very different but popular media outlets. And I think it's good because it raises awareness, it raises conversation. Hopefully, us talking about it, then talking about this subject leads to other people tuning in to learn more about addiction. And that way, our message helps people.
I would say for those out there, remember the stuff that you read on social media today. There's so much AI, so be careful what you decide to share. And he may be a celebrity, but he's also a human. You recently interviewed Hunter Biden, where you had a really honest conversation about I may be this thing that people thought about me, but I'm also like a real person in a life, and I was in pain, and I'm struggling just like other people have pain and struggle. And so I think it's important to like also uh, wish Brad also the best here. I mean he may be a celebrity, but at the end of the day, he's still just a human being struggling to figure something out if that's what's going on. So, like I said, I've always considered him one of my favorite actors to watch, and I love him. I love the craft that he delivers, and so hope wish him all the best.
Likewise, and the only difference between his career and ours is, I mean, I guess we're kind of public, but his career is very, very public, and ours is a bit more private. So Adam, thanks for this great combo. Hopefully the audience gets some value out of this, where we did our little hot take reaction to something going on in the mainstream.
Yeah, I think what we should also do is, piggybacking off of this conversation, is have a conversation about where and how does substance fit in recovery, if at all. And so, if that's an interesting conversation you'd like for us to have, please comment below. And thank you all for tuning in.
Peace.
Peace.